Hi, everyone. Welcome to another exciting, entertaining, informative interview with one of the Investors Chronicles editors. I've got with me Val Cipriani. She tells me while she's Italian, she is not connected to the Cipriani family, which is a shame. But what isn't a shame is her articles are some of my favorite from Investors Chronicle. And I'm not just saying that to flatter her because she's in front of me, but because I've been reading them and I'm going to tell you what I like about them right now. Val, let me tell you what I like about your articles. And by the way, just so you know, I've read all of last night in anticipation of this. And I made a note of some of the things that I particularly like. So one of the things that I like is where you write, okay, shares I love.
Okay.
Now, you get right to the point there. Most people are a little bit, let me dance around the subject and all of this. So obviously one of the benefits of people reading that is they'll get access to things like that. How do you pick shares you love? What are your criteria? And I guess when you're writing about them, you're also educating people at the same time because you're telling them what you like.
So the way Shares I Love works is that we ask fund managers what shares they like. So we kind of like work with them to look at sort of holdings that they might, for example, have added recently to their portfolios, or that, you know, make up quite a big like chunk of the funds in a very active way. So compared to, say, the index, and then we kind of like give them voice a little bit. Which is not something we do super often, but I think in some cases, you know, it's quite interesting.
But when you do that, I mean, I want to take this one, and the one I looked at was Airbnb, and as you say, you ask the fund manager. But when you pick those shares I love, you've got to pick the fund manager. You've got to presumably have a pretty good idea they're not going to pick something which is going to be awful for the readership. How do you go about that whole process?
I think we just look, you know, at like holdings that we're interested anyway in the magazine, and then kind of like try and find a fund that has maybe recently done something with it, and that's how we go about it. And then, you know, you want all the usual things about maybe stock picking, you know, to like make sure that the company has been doing well, or maybe that, you know, there's something about it that might be a bit interesting. So, for example, it might be a bit undervalued by the market, you know, a lot of different things.
Yeah. And will you add your own, will you expand upon what the fund managers themselves might have done, give your own views on the stocks as well? And when you do that, what are the things that you look for in companies? What sort of draws your attention? Is it because it's in the news and you just want to write about it? Or is it that you have a favorite aspect? I mean, you know, some people love valuation, some love growth, some love momentum, some just love news flow. Is there anything in particular about when you're looking at companies that draws your attention?
I mean, I don't look at shares as much, but probably valuation quite a bit. Just because, we tend to cover UK shares quite a lot. Obviously there is a lot of that going on.
Fantastic, which is a polite way of saying they're undervalued, a lot of UK stocks. And there might be opportunities there. Now, moving on from stocks, as you said, you cover a lot of other things. And one of the things that I liked is, and I've written down here, beyond stocks, you more broadly will cover things about basically what can make people money. And some of the recent stories were buying someone out of a property or a business. Now, that's going to appeal to, obviously, a certain segment of the readership and the people watching this, but also how to prepare for tax hikes, things like that, which sometimes we forget, we overlook, and you do the research on that. What do you enjoy the most, and how do you go about picking those angles? How do you come up with the ideas on, you know, the remit clearly there is what's going to interest the readers, what's going to make them money, what's going to save them money. What's the thought process you go through for that?
I think I try to think about things that are not obvious. And so try and, you know, put myself in the reader's shoes. And obviously, you know, we're thinking about, you know, we sort of know the type of like finances that our readers have. So there is an element of that, definitely. But there is just an element of, you know, some scenarios that you might find yourself facing in your everyday life at some point. And at that point, you know, you will presumably need some guidance, because it's equally true that at some point you might need to buy someone else out of a house, for example, because you've, say, inherited with your siblings. But it's also true that it's not something that happens to you every day, right? So when that happens, you're going to need some pointers and some ideas. And that's the kind of like gap that I try to fill, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And of course, when you're researching something like that, now, obviously, whether it's a house, a business, just more broadly about money matters, you need credibility, you need authority, you need Investors Chronicle kind of journalists such as yourselves doing it. How much work is involved? I mean, are you calling up accountants? Are you calling up other experts? Take me and the readers through some of the research process that goes into this, because I think sometimes people who read financial magazines might think, oh, well, the journalist sits at a computer, Googles a few things, writes a few things out. And of course, it isn't that, because I've been upstairs and I've been around the building and I've seen the work that goes on. So tell me a bit about the research that goes in.
Yeah, so there is quite a lot of like just talking to people who do that as a job.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you have like a very complicated tax issue or financial planning issue, you might go to a financial advisor, right? But you are also going to have to pay them quite a bit of money. But because we're a magazine, we're kind of able to talk to these people and have them.
Investors Chronicle. Somebody calls up from Investors Chronicle. Somebody's going to answer the call.
Correct, yeah. So we're able to kind of like ask them questions and get like, more general pointers about things and talk to them about the things that happen quite often, that they see quite often. And then we're also, then the other aspect is sort of, you do the research, you obviously, look at the official sources, you talk to people, and then there is an element of kind of like making it quite easily accessible and understandable.
Yeah.
Because I think that's also one of the big barriers with this kind of content, is that it can be quite difficult to kind of like figure out. And so we sort of do the work for them.
And that's a very important point, the ability to communicate and put into simple terms, because the viewership and the readership will be everybody, as I've said in other interviews, from beginners to very experienced and expert people. What are the skills you use to make things easy to read, but also interesting to read? Because actually, as you know, people don't want to necessarily think about tax and some of the things that you're covering, but it's so important that they do, because it could make them a fortune. It could save them a lot of money or make them a lot of money. So how do you communicate that?
Yeah. So I'm not gonna say that tax is fun or something like that, because nobody would believe me. But the way I try to like work around it is to make it very kind of you refer back to your everyday life quite a lot, and also think about real life situations. And we do tend to include things like, if we've got a case study, we'll tell you a little story about this person to whom the thing has actually happened. So that really helps, obviously, bring it to life for the person reading it. And then the other half of it is making sure, we're not using overly technical language, that we're explaining it if we're doing that. And then that the sort of like structure of the writing is as straightforward as it can possibly be.
Now, I'm going to ask you a difficult question, and this is vital, I think, for the readership to know. And it's a bit of a leading question. Do you love what you do?
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah, I really do.
What do you love about it the most?
I think actually the process I've just described. Yeah. So it's that, doing some really quite in-depth and complicated analysis and then turning it into something that almost everybody can understand. Yeah.
That's the reason I asked, because I could tell when you were describing it, this is somebody who really loves what they do. And I think when people love what they do, people love reading what they've written. Speaking of which, so these were some headlines of yours that I've written down. I've lost my confidence. How do I invest my £2.5 million in cash? Smart ways to use your ISA. Use ISAs to help your family and cut your inheritance tax bill. The best stocks and shares ISAs for investors. Now, what grabbed me about those headlines was they're practical. They're things that I know a lot of people would want to know about, but they don't realize they need to ask and that they should know about. Sum up some of this is, again, being a bit unfair, some of the things people don't know that they should know, if I were to put you on the spot about the topics that we've mentioned. And again, how are you going to keep on finding these good stories to write about? Because, you think, well, okay, you've written about the best stocks and shares ISAs. Do you leave that for 12 months? What if somebody subscribes tomorrow and misses that? How do they get up to speed on some of these things?
Okay, so very broad question. I'm going to try and address things. So I think some things that people don't know that they need to think about So definitely, I think tax efficiency is one of them. As we said, it's quite boring. It's quite basic. But then if you make the mistakes, the basic ones, then they're actually going to cost you quite a lot of money. Because even like, a basic thing is, capital gains tax. Okay, the rate, if you're a high rate taxpayer, is 20% of your gains. Yeah. So if you end up having to pay all of that, that is really a lot of your returns that are just going to the taxman straight away. So you don't want to think about these things, but actually you must. So, this is all the basic things like using your ISA allowance, using your pension, all those things. And then one thing I will say that is a bit general is about like doing that planning work.
Yeah.
So when you start investing, you're maybe trying it out a little bit. And you're not really thinking about all those things. So, the strategy, the tax planning, where, how should I invest? What are my goals?
Yeah.
All those things are not necessarily in your mind because you're like, okay, I'll try it out and see how it goes. But then actually you do need to think about it from the start if you want to have, very good results. So I think that's a mistake that happens quite often. And then you get people, 15, 20 years down the line who have been investors for a very long time. At that point, they know what they're doing. Yeah. But they have, an original mistake that they need to kind of correct. And then in terms of, how do we keep finding things? I think, even the world of like personal finance, it keeps changing. There's a lot of news. There's a lot of things happening. Platforms, you were looking, the best sizes and stuff. Yeah. Platforms change a lot. New ones launch. Yeah. Prices change. So this is kind of like the way we think about it. What has changed since the last time we wrote about it? Should we try it from a different angle?
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of work you're doing. I'm not trying to do a video appealing for you to get a pay rise, but what I'm saying is that's a lot of work and research that goes in. Does some of the stuff which could still be valuable 6 months down the line, like the best ISAs, is that something people who sign up who are part of Investors Chronicle can go back to? Can they find that? Can they find it easily? Can they search for it and say, well, actually, I want to know, this should be my go-to place, not Google or another search engine, but actually look on Investors Chronicle? Yeah,
the website is quite well organized from that point of view. And I think it's organized in a way that is more about topics and less necessarily about the last things. So, we've got a thing that says pensions and there you can find all your pensions content. Yeah. So that makes it, and that there's a lot of like sort of evergreen content guides. I think that sort of work pretty much all the time.
Well, I think it's becoming increasingly important, more than it was 20 years ago, because now, of course, you've got so many competing voices which don't have the authority, the expertise, the credibility, let alone all the rules of financial journalism that you have to abide by, which obviously people on social media just keep talking all sorts of nonsense. Tell me, which are your favorite topics to talk about and write about? I know every journalist always has their go-to subject. Whatever it is, it'll be, I love talking about this. Which is your favorite subject?
I do. So there's a few things, but I do really like talking about pension planning. Because it's quite complex.
Are you just dying to be 65 years old? Yeah. I can't wait till I'm old. I can really dip into my pension.
No, but it's quite. I think it's quite complicated. So there's a lot of like moving bits. Yeah. So that makes it interesting for me to write about. Because some things are quite straightforward. Like as I was saying before, just use your ISA when you start. Whereas when you need to think about preparing for your pensions, there's a lot of stuff to think about. So then it becomes interesting to write about, although not sounding very exciting if you say it like that.
But okay, let's make it exciting. Let's turn pensions into exciting. And when I started out as a barrister, that was my first 6 months work was all pensions. And I'm sorry, I don't find it exciting. But let's make it exciting for a second. What are the biggest mistakes you think people are making with their pensions? If you had to list them in any order that they're making that you want to correct, you've got a platform now to say to them, guys, watch out for this on your pension. You're missing it. You don't realize. What are those?
Let me have a think. So I think people, they, in a way, they overcomplicate things a little bit. So let's maybe do a bit in chronological order. So when you're saving for your pension, by still quite early days, and you've got like 10, 20, 30 years, you don't really need to worry about it too much. It's quite straightforward. You invest the money, you set a strategy that works for your risk profile. You can actually take quite a lot of risk if you're okay with that, because the time horizon is very long. So you can afford to wait to the market out.
And by taking more risk, do you mean picking fewer companies?
I just mean investing basically all of it into equities. Because when you've got 30 years, you don't really need bonds, right? Whereas obviously when you've got you need to draw cash from your pension, then things are different. But when you've got a long time horizon, you can just set a very kind of aggressive asset allocation if you want to. And then, again, your portfolio might go down 30% during a market downturn, but you're not touching it because it's your pension. I mean, if it's in a pension pot and you're quite young, you literally cannot touch it anyway. Because you can't withdraw funds anyway. So, you can leave it there to work. So you don't really need to panic too much about the things that are happening. But if, on the other hand, people who invest quite a lot and like investing, I think they have a bit of a temptation to fiddle with things a little bit. So that is potentially a mistake that you can make a bit early on at the beginning. And then another one, which is quite commonly discussed, I think, is that when you start drawing money from your pension, you still need a good chunk of growth assets. And that is because we're living quite long lives these days. If everything goes well, you might very well live until 90, which is a very good thing. But it also means that you are going to need quite a lot of money and that your portfolio needs to work for you for a very long time. And so you kind of need to find the right balance there between having, a good size of cash and bonds so that you can draw the income down. But you also need to make sure that the portfolio keeps growing because then you also got inflation.
Do you think people make the mistake that when they can withdraw some money tax-free from their pension, that they think I should, as opposed to thinking, well, actually, I'm going to live long. Let's keep some of this invested if I don't need to withdraw it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a thing. So 25% tax-free lump sum means you can get a quarter of your pension pot in cash. But then if you don't need the cash, you might as well leave it there. And obviously, it's quite a complex conversation. It depends on a lot of things. Absolutely. But generally speaking, you do not need to take it straight away. And most importantly, you do not need to take all of it in one go. So you can sort of stagger the withdrawals, which can be quite tax efficient as well. So
and especially if hopefully the tax changes go in your favor, which they never seem to, but who knows? If you leave it in longer, they might change the rules and say, well, you can withdraw more tax-free. But let's go to the other extreme. And I'm going to ask you, it's sort of a question personal to me, which I've never really asked anybody. But since I've got an expert with me, and this is the advantage of the Investors Chronicle, because this would have been answered in there, junior SIPs. Okay, so I've got a junior ISA for my 6-year-old son. But I never bothered getting a junior SIP because I just thought he's 6, junior SIP, he can't access it till 55 or something ridiculous. I won't even be here anyway, so he can curse me all he wants that I didn't leave him a junior SIP. Do you think they're a good idea or a bad idea? Or more importantly, how do you decide? I should say to the viewers, I did not send these questions in advance. So poor Val is having to think about these on the spot, which is why I'm talking to camera, because I'm buying her time. By the way, I should say, when your colleagues needed time to think, they each of them said, that's a brilliant question. I
haven't done that.
No, I noticed that. No, don't think I didn't notice. But you carry on.
I might refer to that at some point.
Yeah.
I think the key thing you want to think about is what you want to help them with. Because obviously it's a brilliant vehicle, but on the other hand, there's also junior ISAs which are quite useful and and it's way more flexible in terms what they're gonna use the money for. And when you're thinking that long time horizon, it is really quite difficult. I mean, obviously your kids are gonna need a pension at some point, but they also might need university fees. They also presumably going to need to buy a house. So
he's sick. I'm not sure universities are going to be a thing by the time he's 18. I watch social media. Everybody's saying, nah, forget universities. Who knows? But I know what you mean. You're going to need...
Yeah.
Things don't ever seem to get cheaper, let's put it that way.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, if you want to help your children that way, maybe the first thing you need to think about is everything else covered in a way.
Yeah.
Because when at least this is a personal thing. I'm thinking about myself as well. It is a really long time horizon to think about. It's quite
well. He couldn't act
disorienting.
He's older than even I am now, and I'm 152. So just imagine how long he's got to wait. No, that's very good. And I think that structuring that you provide, I know you have that in your articles as well. You sort of structure how people should make those decisions. So tell me, and I've written other notes on here. I think you and I disagree on one thing in particular, which is the UK ISA. Am I right in thinking you're a fan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm broadly quite in favor with some things that need to be evened out and thought about. But broadly quite in favor.
Yeah.
I think there's some points to make here. So from the point of view of, the investor, I think here the main thing is that, the ISA allowance has been set at £20,000 since 2017, 2018.
Yeah.
Has been the same. As we know, that means that the real value has gone down. So that means that, it was a good time for the government to give investors a little gift, especially consider that, other allowances are going down. So, the tax burden has increased. So that is a first point I would make. And then if you move from there to the point of view of the sort of taxpayer, which is you and I as well, if you think about it, that is also our money. And it kind of makes sense that you would use the money to kind of support the UK market and the UK economy potentially. I am broadly in favor, with the caveat that, of course, it has not happened. There's a consultation. There is a lot of stuff going on this year, so we will have to wait and see, what form it takes.
Of course, yeah.
And then with the second caveat, which is that it needs to be very clear that this is for the people who exhaust their annual ISA allowance anyway and then want to put some extra money.
Is that what they've actually said? Have they said it?
Well, they haven't said it, but the way it's meant to be structured, it's important that that is clear, because otherwise, if I'm an investor and I'm not clear on that, why would I put 5K and then be forced to invest in UK companies when I can, put them in the regular ISA and then do it anyway if I want to, but it gives me the flexibility.
It's funny. It's a government announcement which sounds so simple, like they often do. And then you dig into the complexities and you realize, what about this? Which I think is why there's the consultation. Do you think you might feed into the consultation? I mean, you're an expert in the area.
I don't
know. Write in and say, well, this is what I think. I mean, that's the point of a consultation. They have experts feeding in.
Yeah, maybe I will do.
Yeah. Well, you could probably send them a column or two. Just send the Chancellor a copy of Investors Chronicle. I've got his address. It's not complicated. It's 11 Downing Street. But make sure you charge him for it. Now, I've also written top pointer for people to boost their retirement returns, and you're not allowed to say save more and diversify. So if you're not allowed to say save more and diversify, what are the top pointers for people to boost their retirement returns, would you say?
See, you're cheating a bit here because you've already asked me about the mistakes people make.
Yeah,
which is the same question the other way around.
No, you can answer it any way you want.
No, I think, I'm going to say something maybe similarly boring, but just kind of, be disciplined with it, which is, I think, a key principle of investing. And we talk about it all the time and it seems very easy, but then it's not actually very easy to be disciplined with that kind of thing. And, that means setting a strategy. Yeah. It means saving regularly. It means do not panic when things maybe do not go the way you were hoping for. Yeah. And that, it's all about playing the long game, especially investing in general, but especially boosting your retirement savings. Yeah. So you kind of want, it's a marathon, basically, not a sprint, and you want to address it that way.
Yeah. That's a brilliant answer. Have a process. Shall I tell you a better answer? Which you didn't do. You were supposed to lean across and go, well, obviously, read my articles, Alpesh, in Investors Chronicle.
Yeah, there's plenty of material.
But that's okay. The answer was good that you gave. Look, we're going to run out of time. I want to ask you one final question, which is, right, tell me something I didn't ask you that you really wanted to let the viewers and readers know. And don't forget, this goes on social media, so there could be millions. This could go viral. This is your opportunity to go financially viral, which sounds a bit infectious, but so take your shot. What do you think? And by the way, if you haven't got something, you can just do a dance. And it's up to you. Information or dance.
Maybe this is the time for me to go like, oh, this is a brilliant question.
Yeah, that's the time you want to use that. Use that filler.
No, I think people don't know how easy it is to, invest in a, you need to be careful. You need to be reasonable about it. It's not super straightforward, but it's not as nearly as complicated as people think.
Yeah, I think actually, I absolutely agree with you. And that's one thing which actually we've missed from the other interviews as well. We forget that people actually are more fearful than they should be. And, you and I are in the field where we want to make it simpler for them. Investors Chronicles in that field as well. And I think that's actually what all of these interviews are about, to remove that fear. And hopefully having those experts hand-holding you, such as you, Val, will help. Well, we've run out of time, you see. So until we get our own slot on BBC 9 o'clock Fridays, we've got to finish there, I'm afraid. So I want to thank Val Cipriani for her insights into, well, a lot of things. Funds, pensions, mistakes investors make, building their confidence to make sure that actually there's help at hand, there's expert help at hand. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And remember, you can have a 12-week trial to the print and digital versions of the Investors Chronicle for only £12. And don't forget to sign up to your free, I did say free, Investors Chronicle daily newsletter to get your stock market news, analysis, highlights, all into your inbox every single morning. I'm going to say it again, free.